It was almost midnight in Brooklyn. The streets were quiet. Only a few cars passed now and then. Jade Wilson was driving home in her black luxury car. She looked calm, her hands steady on the wheel. She wore a simple black coat, no jewelry, no fancy hair, but she carried something powerful inside her dignity. As she stopped at a red light, flashing lights appeared behind her, red, blue, siren. She looked in her rearview mirror and sighed softly. "Here we go again," she whispered. Police car pulled her over. Officer Rick Carson stepped out. He was tall, white, and carried the swagger of someone who thought he owned the street. He knocked hard on Jade's window. She rolled it down slowly, keeping both hands where he could see. "License and registration," Rick barked. "Of course," Jade replied, polite and calm. "May I ask why I was pulled over?" "You were driving too slow. Might be drunk, or hiding something." Jade blinked once. "Actually, I was under the speed limit because of construction, but I'm happy to cooperate." Rick narrowed his eyes. He didn't like her tone. It wasn't scared. It wasn't weak. It was controlled. He looked at her car, then back at her. "This, your car?" "Yes." "You sure? You don't exactly look like someone who owns a Benz." Jade didn't flinch. "Would you like the documents?" She handed over her license and registration. Rick snatched them without thanks. Back at his car, Rick sat down and typed her name into the system. Jade Alina Wilson. But instead of the usual info, the screen blinked. "Restricted clearance. Authorized access only." He frowned. "Tried again. Still blocked." Another line showed up. "City-level government authorization required." Rick stared, confused. "Who the hell is she?" he muttered. He looked at her again. She was still sitting there calmly, both hands on the wheel, not moving. That confidence made him angry. He walked back to her window. "Listen," he said. "You're acting real smooth, like you've done this before." "I know my rights," Jade replied softly, "and I know how to stay safe." "Are you hiding something?" Rick pressed. "Fake license? Stolen car?" Jade tilted her head, still calm. "You're welcome to call your supervisor." "Why would I do that?" "Because this is about to become a problem for you." Rick's face turned red. Was she threatening him? "Ma'am, I could have you step out of the car right now." "Then do it. Let's make sure the body cam is on." Rick looked down. It was still recording. He stepped back and radioed in. "Dispatch. I need confirmation on a license. Name's Jade Wilson. Black female, driving a black Mercedes. Something's off." There was a pause. Then the voice of Captain Mills came through. "What location?" "Corner of Malcolm X and Gates Avenue." Another pause. "Then you pull her over." "Yes, sir." "Stand down. Immediately." Rick blinked. "Sir, let her go. Do not ask her another question. And turn off your camera the moment you're done." "Can I ask who she's?" "Not just a driver. She's someone you don't want to mess with." Rick walked back to Jade's window, pale and nervous. "You're free to go, ma'am. Have a safe night." Jade looked at him for a long second, then rolled up her window and drove away smooth, silent, powerful. But Rick couldn't let it go. As he sat in his car, hands shaking, he searched her name again on his phone. Then he found it. Deputy Mayor of New York City, founder of the Liberty Project, former civil rights attorney, advisor to the mayor, featured in Time magazine. Rick's throat went dry. He had just pulled over a woman who could end his career with one phone call, and he had treated her like a criminal. Meanwhile, Jade drove home, face calm but heart heavy. This wasn't the first time she had been stopped before, driving a nice car, walking in a nice neighborhood, or simply existing in her skin. But this time was different, because this time, the whole city was about to know, and not because she planned it, but because someone was watching from a nearby building, filming it all. The next morning, a video hit social media. Racist cop pulls over powerful black woman, has no idea who she is. It showed the stop, his tone, her calm, his face when he got the call. By noon, it had 3 million views. By evening, it had made the news. Top NY official harassed in late-night traffic stop. Rick's name was trending. And Jade. She didn't say a word online. She let the silence speak, but behind the scenes, phones were ringing at the mayor's office, at police headquarters, at newsrooms across the country. Everyone had one question: who is Jade Wilson really? It had only been one night since the traffic stop, but the internet was already on fire. The video of Jade Wilson being pulled over had gone viral. News channels picked it up. Activists reposted it. Everyone was talking about the calm woman in the black car, and the rude officer who didn't know who she was. At the precinct, Officer Rick Carson walked in with a storm behind his eyes. He slammed his locker shut. The other officers stared but said nothing. "This is ridiculous," Rick muttered to himself. "I was doing my job." She acted suspicious. One of his coworkers, Officer Ramon, leaned over. "You mean the deputy mayor?" Rick froze. "What? You didn't know? She's like second in charge of the city, Ivy League lawyer, runs all the justice reform stuff." "Man, you messed up." Rick stared at him, speechless. "She looked regular." Ramon raised an eyebrow. "Regular doesn't mean powerless." Meanwhile, across town, Jade sat in her office at City Hall. She was quiet, composed, focused. Her assistant Tasha walked in with a worried look. "The video's blowing up. People want you to speak out." Jade shook her head. I didn't post it. I won't add fuel. But they're defending you. People are angry about how he treated you. Jade looked out the window. Let them talk. I've got bigger things to fix. But things weren't calming down. That afternoon, Jade received a call from the mayor himself. Come upstairs now. She walked into his office stall, strong, calm. The mayor stood by the window, holding a tablet. Jade, what happened? Last night, a routine stop. The officer didn't recognize me. You know the city's under pressure? One wrong move, and we've got chaos in the streets. Jade nodded. I know. That's why I didn't fight him. I didn't post. I didn't make noise. Still, it's out there. You're trending higher than the city budget vote, he sighed. They want a press conference. Jade shook her head slowly. Not yet. I don't want to look like I'm chasing fame. Then what do you want? She looked him dead in the eye. I want change. Real change. Not camera time. Well, Jade remained silent online. Others weren't. Celebrities, lawyers, community leaders all began posting. The way she stayed calm. That's real power. That officer should be suspended immediately. She didn't even flex her title because real queens don't need to. Back at the precinct, Rick was getting nervous. Reporters were outside. Internal Affairs had called him in. He sat in a small gray room across from two serious-looking officers. Did you know who she was when you pulled her over? They asked. No. Did she threaten you? Did she raise her voice? No. So why did you assume she didn't own the car? Rick hesitated. It was a gut feeling. The officers looked at each other. We're going to need your body cam footage. Rick's stomach dropped. He knew what was on there. Meanwhile, Jade visited a local school the next morning for a planned event. When she entered, the kids cheered. That's her. That's the lady on the news. She smiled gently and knelt beside a little girl. What's your name? Maya. Hi, Maya. Why are you smiling? Because you're brave. You didn't yell. You didn't cry. We're just strong. Jade's eyes softened. That's the best compliment I've ever had. Later that day, as she got back to her office, Tasha came running in. You need to see this. She handed Jade a phone. Rick's face was on the screen. He had gone live. Sweaty, angry, talking fast. She's making me look like a racist. I didn't know who she was. That's not a crime. She could have just told me then. Click. The live ended. Jade placed the phone down slowly. She looked at Tasha. Let him talk. You sure? He's lying? Jade nodded. The more he talks, the more truth slips out. That night, Jade sat alone on her balcony. The city lights sparkled below. Cars moved like tiny ants. She held her phone, scrolling through thousands of comments. Some hateful, some supportive, some just confused. Then one caught her eye. If someone like her can be treated that way, what chance do the rest of us have? Jade took a deep breath. She wasn't angry. She was ready. The next morning, her assistant handed her a folder. Press wants a statement. What should I tell them? Jade stood up and straightened her blazer. Tell them I'll speak tomorrow. And tell them it won't be what they expect. The sun was barely up, but the city was already buzzing. Headlines flashed across morning news. Deputy mayor pulled over cop under investigation, racial profiling, or misunderstanding. NYPD under fire, Jade Wilson breaks silence. Today at City Hall, everyone waited to hear what she would say. But behind closed doors, phones were ringing nonstop. At NYPD headquarters, Chief Daniels was in a private meeting with his top staff. He looked tired, his eyes dark from lack of sleep. This isn't just bad PR, he said. This is a political bum. Jade Wilson is respected across every community in this city. An officer nervously raised his hand. Should we suspend Officer Rick Carson? Too late, Daniels replied. He already went live, blamed her, called her dramatic. He sighed. Now the mayor's calling me every hour. At the same time, inside City Hall, Jade was preparing for her statement. She stood in front of a mirror, not wearing fancy clothes, just a simple navy suit. No makeup, no earrings. Tasha walked in, holding a small notepad. Everyone's asking what you'll say. Reporters are waiting outside already. Good, Jade said calmly. Let them wait. You sure about this, Jade? Jade nodded. It's not about me anymore. It's about everyone who's ever been silenced on the street. Across the city, Rick Carson was alone in his apartment. He hadn't been to work in 2 days. The department told him to stay low, but the calls wouldn't stop. Reporters, angry citizens, even strangers threatening him online. He paced the room, sweating. I didn't know who she was. I didn't do anything illegal. His phone buzzed again. Unknown number. He answered. A voice said sharply, you embarrassed this department. Rick, from the top down. Click. At exactly 11 a.m. Jade walked into the press room. The cameras flashed. Dozens of reporters shouted her name. She didn't smile. She didn't wave. She stood at the podium and waited for silence. Then she spoke. I was pulled over 3 nights ago for doing nothing wrong. I wasn't surprised. I wasn't angry. I was used to it. But this time, it wasn't just about me. It was about every black person who has to stay calm, polite, and small just to survive a routine stop. I'm not here for revenge. I'm here for reform. She paused. Let her words settle in the room, then continued. I've worked with the NYPD for years. I've sat in meetings. I've signed policies. But still, when I'm on the street in plain clothes, I become just another nobody, until someone checks the badge, or the ID, or the title. And that's the problem. Reporters quickly scribbled down her words. One raised a hand. Miss Wilson, are you calling for Officer Carson to be fired? Jade looked straight into the camera. I'm calling for a system that doesn't need titles to give people respect. If I were just Jade from Brooklyn, without the title, would anyone care? The room fell silent. After the press conference, the video spread faster than the traffic stop. Clips flooded TikTok, Twitter, Instagram. People began sharing their own stories. This happened to me too. She's saying what we've all been feeling. Powerful and graceful. This is leadership. That same afternoon, the mayor called an emergency meeting. He sat with Jade, Chief Daniels, and the city council. Tensions were high. The mayor leaned forward. We can't let this explode. Protests are growing. Trust is falling. Then let's fix it, Jade said firmly. How? Jade pulled out a folder. Body cam review. Sensitivity training. Community listening boards. Real policies, just speeches. Chief Daniels looked surprised. You've been working on this for 2 years? But now, the city's listening. Meanwhile, Rick sat alone, watching the press conference. Her words hit him in a way he didn't expect. He remembered how calm she was, how she didn't fight back, how she just stared at him like she knew something he didn't. And now, he understood. What it was? Power. But not the kind that comes from a badge. Later that night, Jade walked through the neighborhood where she grew up. People waved at her from their steps. Kids ran up for photos. Store owners clapped. An older man walked up and said, I remember when you were just a little girl with a library card and big dreams. Jade smiled. Now I'm just a woman with a voice and I'm going to use it. And across the city, people were starting to ask a new question. What if the woman Rick tried to silence ends up changing the entire system? Before the titles, before the headlines, before the world knew her name, she was just Jade, a girl from Harlem with a sharp mind, a quiet voice, and a heart full of fire. Jade Wilson grew up in a small apartment with her mother Denise, a nurse, who worked night shifts just to put food on the table. They didn't have much, but they had books, prayers, and rules. Be strong, be smart, and never let hate make you small. Her mother used to say. Jade listened, and she remembered. At school, Jade was the quiet one. She didn't talk much, but she noticed everything. She read faster than anyone, wrote poems in her notebooks, solved math problems for fun. But when she walked home through certain neighborhoods, people would cross the street. When she went shopping, workers would follow her around. Even as a teenager, she felt the weight of being judged not for her actions, but for her appearance. She worked hard, graduated top of her class, earned a full scholarship to Columbia University. There, she studied law, not because she wanted money, but because she wanted to understand the system that made people like her feel small. She wanted to change it from inside. During her first internship, she defended a teenager wrongfully arrested. He looked just like her cousin. That case changed her. No one spoke for him. She told her mentor, so I will, and she did. Over the next few years, Jade became one of New York's most respected civil rights lawyers. She didn't shout. She didn't chase the spotlight. But when she walked into court, even judges listened. You don't have to scream when you speak with truth, she once said. Her calm, sharp way of handling cases caught the attention of the mayor. He invited her for coffee. I've seen your work. I need someone like you inside City Hall, he said. Jade didn't want power, but she wanted access, a seat at the table, a voice in the room. So she said yes, and became deputy mayor within 3 years. She created programs for police reform, community outreach, and youth mentorship. She launched the Liberty Project, a foundation to help Black and brown teens fight for their rights. She trained police officers on how to approach citizens with respect. The irony, the same system she helped improve, still treated her like a nobody in plain clothes. And then came that night. The late stop, the rude officer, the disbelief in his voice when he said, "You sure this is your car?" She had experienced it before, but that time, someone had a camera, and the world finally saw what she had been dealing with all her life. After the video went viral, Jade's past started coming into focus. People began asking, who is this woman? Who stayed so calm? Why didn't she yell? How did she learn to carry herself like that? Her answer? Because I was raised to carry the whole world on my back quietly. One night, Jade sat at home reading old messages from her mother. Denise had passed away 2 years ago from cancer, but her texts still lived in Jade's phone. Keep going. They won't see you at first, but they'll feel you later. Stay calm, baby. Your strength is your silence. One day, you'll run this city and they won't even know it's you. Tears filled Jade's eyes. You were right, Mama, she whispered. Across the city, people who had once ignored her name now spoke it with pride. Jade Wilson is the future. She's what leadership should look like. She's changing the city without even raising her voice. But not everyone was happy. Some critics accused her of using the moment for fame. Others said she should have been louder, more aggressive. Jade ignored it all because she wasn't here to perform, she was here to rebuild. Meanwhile, Rick Carson watched the news from his small apartment. Each report was like a punch. The woman he had treated like a threat. The woman he looked down on, she was 10 times more powerful than he had ever imagined. He poured himself a drink and sat in silence. He knew what was coming, an internal hearing. A possible suspension? Maybe worse. His badge didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt empty. But for Jade, this wasn't about revenge. She had no time for ego. She had plans to meet with community leaders, officers, lawmakers. She didn't want Rick fired. She wanted a system that wouldn't allow another Rick to rise. That weekend, she visited a youth center in the Bronx. A young girl asked her, "Are you scared of cops now?" Jade knelt down and said, "No, because I know who I am. And the more we know our worth, the less they can shake us." Back in her office, she pinned her mother's old quote above her desk. Be strong, be smart, never let hate make you small. She looked out the window at the city below, the same streets where she once walked quietly, now whispered her name with respect. The video hadn't just gone viral, it had become a movement. Within days, every news channel in New York was covering the story. Talk shows, podcasts, social media influencers, even national headlines. Powerful black woman stays calm, exposes deep NYPD bias. Jade Wilson, the face of Grace Under Fire. The cop who messed with the wrong woman, but the one person not speaking publicly anymore? Jade Wilson. She had said what she needed to say during the press conference. Now she worked in silence, organizing meetings, visiting communities, reviewing police reform policies. Her phone never stopped buzzing. People wanted interviews, features, sponsorships. Tasha, her assistant, came in holding her iPad. Jade, CBS just offered you a full interview spot. Primetime. Tell them no, Jade replied. Again, yes. Tasha tilted her head. You sure? You could own the spotlight right now. Jade looked her in the eye. I don't need a spotlight. I need a solution. Across town, Rick Carson was drowning in a storm of his own. News trucks parked outside his building. Protesters chanted his name. Rick Carson, racist, in uniform. No badge for bias. He tried to go out in sunglasses and a hoodie, but people still recognized him. He had been placed on administrative leave. No badge, no pay, no respect. His inbox was filled with hate. But what hurt the most was the silence from his fellow officers. No one defended him, no one called. He was alone. Inside police headquarters, Chief Daniels sat with the mayor and 2 senior advisors. We're losing control of the narrative, one advisor said. She's not even saying anything, and she's winning hearts, the other added. The mayor leaned back. What she's doing is smart, powerful, quiet, but everyone feels it. Daniels looked tense. The city's angry, they want Rick fired. But if we do it fast, the union will fight back. And if we wait too long, the public will say we're protecting him. They all stared at each other in silence. This woman didn't just expose one bad officer, the mayor finally said. She exposed a whole system without raising her voice. Back in Jade's office, a thick folder sat on her desk. Inside, letters. From mothers, teachers, college students, and even NYPD officers. One letter read, I've worn this badge for 15 years. I've seen what you saw. I just didn't have the courage to speak. Thank you for doing it for all of us. Another one said, my daughter watched your video and asked, can I be like her someday? I told her yes, because of you. Jade smiled softly. These were the voices that mattered. Tasha rushed in with big eyes. Jade, you're not going to believe this. She handed her a phone. On the screen, Rick Carson. He had just posted a video online. Sweaty, nervous, looking like a man falling apart. I messed up, Rick said into the camera. I judged her. I didn't know who she was, and I assumed the worst. I let bias lead me. I let ego lead me, and I let the badge make me feel bigger than I am. If you're watching this, Ms. Wilson, I'm sorry. You didn't deserve that. Jade watched the video in silence. Tasha crossed her arms. You believe him? Jade didn't answer. She just whispered, the truth hurts. But sometimes, it wakes people up. The video exploded. Some people forgave Rick. Some did in single quotes T. But now, something had changed. Rick Carson was no longer hiding. He was facing the storm. And Jade, she remained steady like a lighthouse during a hurricane. Later that evening, Jade was invited to speak at a town hall. The room was packed. Young people, activists, teachers, officers, elders. She stood at the front, no papers in hand. She didn't read a speech. She spoke from the heart. I didn't plan for this moment. I didn't want to be a symbol. I just wanted to get home safely, like we all do. But now that you're all listening, let me say this clearly. The problem isn't one officer. It's one system, one mindset. And we can't fix that with hashtags or hate. We fix it with truth, with courage, with change. The room was silent. Then applause, standing, loud, lasting. Outside, a reporter asked her, Ms. Wilson, do you plan to run for mayor? She smiled gently. I plan to serve wherever I'm needed most. In that moment, everyone understood. Jade wasn't just another name in the headlines. She was a force, a woman who stayed silent when it mattered, and spoke up when it counted. Pressure was building like a boiling pot. City Hall was tense, NYPD was silent, and the public was watching. Everyone waited for one big question to be answered. Would Officer Rick Carson face justice? The Internal Affairs Bureau (IAB) had officially launched a full investigation. Behind closed doors, Rick sat in a windowless room across from two serious-faced officers. One of them pressed play on a screen showing Rick's body cam footage. The room filled with the sound of his own voice. You don't exactly look like someone who owns a Benz. Fake license? Stolen car? Rick stared down at the table. He could feel the shame rise in his chest like fire. Do you understand why we're here, Officer Carson? One officer asked. Rick nodded. Meanwhile, in a different room across the city, Jade Wilson sat with Chief Daniels. This wasn't a public meeting. No cameras. No press. Just two people with power and very different experiences. Chief Daniels cleared his throat. I want to apologize for what happened. Is this a personal apology? Jade asked calmly. Or from the department? Daniels paused. Both. Jade gave a small nod. Thank you. But apologies don't change systems. Daniels leaned forward. We're getting pressure from every side. The mayor wants peace. The people want change. And the union wants us to protect the badge. And what do you want? Jade asked. He sighed. I want the city to trust us again. Jade looked him straight in the eye. Then you'll need more than words. You'll need to make an example. Back at the IAB interview, Rick was asked again, why did you assume she didn't own the car? Rick paused. Honestly, I saw a black woman in a luxury car, alone at night. And what did that mean to you? It meant she didn't fit the picture in my head. Silence. So you judged her based on a picture, not her actions. Rick nodded slowly. Yes. Meanwhile, outside NYPD headquarters, protesters held signs. Respect before rank. Jade Wilson for mayor. Reform the blue. The media camped outside. Activists gave speeches. Even some retired officers stood with them. Later that day, Jade was invited to a private meeting with the mayor, Chief Daniels, and city council members. She was calm but firm. This isn't just about one traffic stop. It's about how often it happens and no one notices. So what do you propose? The mayor asked. Jade placed a file on the table. Citywide training, body cam transparency, independent citizen review boards, and what about Officer Carson? Jade didn't blink. I don't want revenge, but I want responsibility. Rick, now back at home, stared at his suspension letter. No badge, no gun, no uniform. Just guilt. He looked at the social media comments. Some were calling him a racist, others said he apologized too late. A few defended him but not many. He opened his camera, started recording, and spoke again. I didn't grow up hating anyone, but I grew up around the idea that some people didn't belong in certain places. It was quiet, subtle, like a shadow, and I carried that shadow into my job without even realizing it. Jade Wilson didn't just show me my mistake. She showed the whole city what quiet power looks like, and maybe that's what real leadership is. The video went viral. Not because people forgave him, but because he was finally telling the truth. Jade watched it quietly at her desk. Tasha asked, what do you think? It's not for me to judge, Jade replied. It's for the system to respond. The next day, the NYPD released an official statement. Officer Rick Carson has been suspended without pay. A full disciplinary hearing will follow. We acknowledge the harm caused, and we are committed to repairing trust with the community. But that wasn't all. The mayor made another announcement. Starting next month, we are implementing the Wilson Initiative, a citywide reform program based on policies proposed by Deputy Mayor Jade Wilson. It will include bias training, body cam release policies, and public input panels. This is not just a response, it's a beginning. Jade stood behind the mayor, silent but strong. She didn't smile, she didn't gloat, she just nodded. Because this wasn't a victory for her, it was a win for every silent person who never got a camera or a headline. Rick watched the announcement from his small kitchen. He put the remote down and whispered, she really changed the game. Later that night, Jade visited her mother's grave. She knelt beside it and whispered, they tried to make me small, Mama, but your voice was louder. She placed a white rose on the stone and stood up. The city was changing, not overnight, not easily, but honestly, and it all started with one traffic stop and one woman who stayed calm. It was a gray, cloudy morning when Officer Rick Carson stood outside the NYPD hearing room. No badge, no gun, just a suit and a decision to make. Inside, the disciplinary panel was waiting. 3 senior officers, 1 civilian rights representative, and 1 legal advisor. This wasn't just a hearing, this was Judgment Day. Rick took a deep breath and walked in. Flashbacks hit him the night of the stop. The look on Jade's face, the moment he realized who she was. He sat down, hands slightly shaking. One officer began reading. This hearing is in response to your conduct during the stop of Deputy Mayor Jade Wilson. You are accused of racial profiling, misconduct, and abuse of authority. Do you wish to speak? Rick looked up. Yes, I do. Meanwhile, at City Hall, Jade sat in her office, watching the hearing live stream quietly. She had no intention of interfering. This wasn't about revenge. It was about responsibility. Tasha brought her tea and asked softly, do you want him to lose his job? Jade answered without turning. I want him to finally understand the damage he caused. Whatever the outcome is, I want it to be honest. Back at the hearing, Rick stood up. The room waited. His voice was not loud, not proud. Finally, it was real. I joined this force to protect people. I thought I was a good officer, but I've learned something painful. You can wear a uniform and still carry broken beliefs. That night, I didn't stop a suspect. I stopped a woman because of my assumptions. She was calm, respectful, and smarter than I could imagine, but I didn't treat her like that. I treated her like a threat. He paused, voice shaking. And for that, Ty, I'm sorry. One of the officers leaned forward. Why now? Why be honest today? Rick answered plainly. Because silence is safe, but truth is healing. Jade watched from the screen. Her face didn't move, but her eyes softened. After the hearing, the panel left to deliberate. Rick sat outside on a bench, hands clasped. He didn't care about headlines anymore. He didn't care about the internet. He cared about who he was becoming. Hours later, the panel returned. One officer cleared his throat and read, "After a review of the footage, interviews, and your personal statement, you will be suspended for 6 months without pay. You will also be required to complete an advanced community justice course and be reassigned to a public outreach unit upon return. This is not punishment, it's a chance to rebuild." Rick nodded. It wasn't easy, but it was fair. This was his last stand, and maybe his first step forward. That evening, Jade received a letter at her office. It had no fancy seal, just her name handwritten on the front. Inside, "Dear Ms. Wilson, I know this letter can't undo the night I failed you, but I hope it shows that I'm trying to learn. Not because the cameras are off, but because the mirror is on. You didn't yell at me, you didn't threaten me, and you could have instead. You led, and I followed. Thank you." Rick Carson J. folded the letter slowly. She didn't smile. She didn't cry. She just closed her eyes and whispered, "Good." Later that week, at a youth center event, a young boy asked Jade, "Miss Jade, what do you do when someone wrongs you?" She knelt down and said gently, "You don't shrink, you don't shout, you stand. And if they learn, you let them." Outside, the clouds had cleared. The storm was fading, and for the first time, in a long time, change felt real. The city had changed, not completely, not overnight, but something was different. People walked a little prouder. Conversations were a little louder, and one woman's name had become a symbol of calm strength. Jade Wilson. She wasn't looking for attention. She never asked to be famous. But after that one traffic stop, her silence spoke louder than any siren. And now, she was being asked to do something she never imagined. Train the very officers who once looked right through her. At the NYPD training center, a large hall filled with new recruits. They were fresh, sharp, and eager. At the front of the room stood Jade. No uniform, no badge's presence. She looked around the room slowly before speaking. "How many of you joined the force to protect people?" Almost every hand went up. "Good," she nodded. "Then let me show you how to do that. Without fear, without ego, and without assumptions." Back in the city, Rick Carson was different now. He had returned to duty, but not on patrol. His new post was at a community outreach center in the Bronx. There, he spoke to teenagers about law, respect, and how to stay safe during police stops. But more importantly, he listened. One afternoon, Rick sat in a circle of students. A boy asked, "Why'd you pull over that lady?" "She didn't do anything." Rick didn't lie, "because I saw her through the wrong lens. I wore the badge, but forgot to wear humility." And far from all the noise, Jade's life moved forward too. She continued her work in policy, education, and justice reform. But she also took time for herself, for small things, like reading a book in the park, smiling at the kids who waved at her, calling her aunt on Sunday afternoons. She hadn't changed, but the world around her finally started seeing her clearly. One evening, she received a surprise call from the mayor. "The council has voted," he said. "They want to name the new civil training center after you." Jade paused. "Why me?" "Because you reminded the whole city what quiet power looks like. You didn't yell, you didn't curse, you stood in the storm and let your truth speak for itself." Weeks later, the ribbon-cutting event was packed. Reporters, officers, students, and families gathered under a large banner, the Jade Wilson Center for Justice and Leadership. Jade gave one final speech, not long, not loud. Just real. "I didn't want to be a face on a banner. I wanted to be the voice behind a movement. This building isn't mine. It belongs to every person who's been told they're a nobody. Because the truth is, your power isn't in your title. It's in your courage, and your calm is not weakness. It's your weapon." The crowd stood and clapped. Among them, Rick stood too, not ashamed, not defensive. Just respectful. Later, as Jade walked to her car, a woman approached her with tears in her eyes. She held her daughter's hand. "She watched your video. She stopped being scared. Now she wants to be like you." Jade knelt beside the little girl and smiled. "Then she'll be even stronger than me." And so, the story ended where it began, not with shouting, not with chaos, but with a voice that never needed volume to shake the ground.